Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're living in, it's time for Sumud. All about humanity, so this right here for everyone. Uplift, amplify, empower everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're living in, it's time for Sumud.
On this episode of the Sumud Podcast, we uplift, empower, and amplify Palestinian American public intellectual and scholar activist, Dr. Rabab Abdulhadi. Dr. Abdulhadi is a founding director and senior scholar of the Arab and Muslim Ethnicities and Diaspora Studies program at San Francisco State University. She also co-founded the Islamophobia Studies Journal and was the first Arab or Muslim to be elected to the board of the New York Civil Liberties Union. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast wherever you watch or listen. And for those of you who are used to listening to us, we officially have a new co-host, Zeina Ashrawi. If you all recall, she was on an episode a few weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, Zeina, I'm not sure.
Just about, yeah.
Welcome. And by the time they actually watch this episode, the announcement will have gone out. And I know it's important for you to be a part of this episode, Zeina, because Dr. Abdulhadi is very important to you.
She absolutely is. It's an honor to be here with you, Dr. Rabab, and of course, Dr. Ed, and I look forward to what we can do together.
So,
I'm so glad.
Yeah. So, Dr. Abdulhadi, you grew up in Nablus. My wife was her family's from Nablus as well. But you were there in the 50s, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
I was born in the 50s, actually. Yeah.
Okay. And what was your experience like? What do you remember? Because I find it fascinating, the old days or the old times, if you could give us a bit of your experience.
I don't know what's the old days. It's all relative, because when people were born in before First World War, they say the old days. So old days are relative things. So for me, I actually was born in 1955. So for me, you'd say maybe the 60s would be the old days, because I didn't really know much when I was very young. And I remember our first maybe year of our life, we lived in Amman. And then my family moved to Nablus about maybe 1960 or something. And my first year, I went to school in Kermel School. And I was staying with my aunt. My parents, my dad had this scholarship in Netherlands, and my mom went with him, and they took my brother for physical therapy. But the next year, we all reunited, the whole family. And I mean, I loved it. I look at my school year, at my childhood with fondness. And there were rough moments, but I remember playing with the kids, with my school childhood friends. I still remember, I know them. I'm in touch with them. When I go, I look them up. Some are living in Amman now. I look them up. I find out where they are. We lived on a street called the Rahbat, because at the end of the street, there is Rahbat al-Wardiya. They had a school. It wasn't really complete school, convent, but they also used to teach piano and French. I tried to learn piano. I couldn't, but I learned French. I took actually many years. It was really important to me. And then I was also in public school. My first school was Zamila Muhayrin, which was on Rahbat Street. And we were very supportive of the Algerian Revolution at the time. We used to chant every day for Algeria. It was still fighting for its independence. So that was for us what we remember when we were young. It was also, we were under Jordanian rule. So, and my family was not very fond of King Hussein. And so whenever the Jordanian jeeps drove by, everybody turned down the radio on Sawt al-Arab, which used to carry the speeches of Jamal Abdel Nasser. So everybody knew that you will turn it down. And my dad, my aunt, around us, all the family and the family friends were all like part of the Arab national movement. And there were other like opposition, but I know the Arab national movement. I think there were some Ba'athis, for example, Bassam Shakar, the former mayor, he was Ba'ath. There were some people, nationalists and Arab nationalists and Ba'athis. I know there were communists too, but I don't think any friends of my family were from the opposition. And it was rough, but it's really the roughest thing was the Israeli occupation. That was the hardest thing, that when it happened, it was really the hardest part. So it curfew the whole town completely. We would not able to go to school. There is, when the occupation started, when the Israeli tanks entered Nablus, they entered from the eastern part. So everybody thought, of course, that it was the Iraqis, the Algerians, because you can't enter from the western parts. That's what Israel is. And so many of the young people of the street, they went out to salute them. And I remember one of the guys from the neighborhood whose family had a grocery store was shot and killed by the Israelis because everybody thought they were Arabs. And we were all like hiding in us and our neighbors in our dining room because it was the most secure room, and we would lift our heads to watch. But then there was on the roof of our roof, there was a Jordanian soldier who fought with the Israelis and was martyred, which during that time didn't get out and so on. But after like a day or two, when, basically Israel occupied us and won the war, they went around with speakers saying, with their broken accent, "Ya Ahlan Nablus Kiram, curfew, and nobody comes out of your house, but if you have weapons, you need to come and surrender them." And of course, some people had weapons, not that many, but we had a local defense committee. My dad was in charge of it. And so they refused us, but they didn't want to hand them over to the Israelis. So what they decided to do is they were throw them into this big, like a park, which was next to the police, the usual police station. So they decided they'll throw their guns in the park, in El Midan, because they weren't going to hand them over to the Israelis. Even if the Israelis would come and collect them, they weren't going to hand them directly. So people went and threw the guns and so on. And I remember my dad told me, I'm the eldest. He told me, "Habibti, go on the roof and get the gun from this. There is a martyr upstairs." And I went, and there was this Jordanian guy. He's holding the gun like this, and there is blood on the ground. And I had to like remove his arms from it, and I took it. And I don't remember if I cried or not, but it was very tense. I mean, I was already nurtured in what's going on because many of my uncles were arrested many times by Jordan, and they come back like have lost weight. And so they will say where they were. There's somebody will say Jafar. And so we knew, and sometimes the Jordanian soldiers came and searched our house. So not as bad. My dad wasn't as bad as my uncles, but my uncles really, I mean, many of them. And some of my close uncles, some are friends of my family. So I wasn't scared. I remember that I went and did the task and brought it down. And maybe because I was older, and maybe because the situation was so solemn. I mean, it was really serious. And so I brought the gun down and I took it to my dad. My dad went and threw it with me then. And then they decided to, all the guys of some of the people of the neighborhood, to bury the martyrs. So there was the neighbor, the young man, and there was the martyr on the roof of our house. And there were maybe three, but not everybody came out. A few men came out. I know my dad was. So they decided to take the martyrs and bury them in a mass grave called the Fusqiyya. This is for people who you do not know who they are, but you have to bury. We have a tradition. It's very important to bury the dead. Ikram al-mayyit dafna. You honor the dead by burying them. So they went and buried them. Of course, my dad took all the belongings of the martyr soldier, and then my mom hid them in a drawer because this was his belongings, and they buried. And then we remained under the curfew, no school for a very long time. Because Israel imposed a curfew, and also many of our teachers did not. They refused. They called them stankafu. They basically refused to go teach because they weren't going to teach under Israeli curriculum, because Israel imposed immediately that whatever little in the curriculum, even Jordan had some stuff about Palestine, not enough. So we were learning outside of that. But anything about Palestine was completely erased. So many teachers decided we're not going to go teach. But then some teachers came back, and after maybe I think a few months, 6 months or something, they lifted the curfew, so we started going back to school. But then, so we went back to school. It was really rough. And I just want to fast forward with the Jordanian soldier, because at the beginning, and I don't know what it happened, because I know that Israel closed the borders. So if you weren't there on June 6, 1967, you're not counted as a resident of the West Bank or at Gaza at the same time, likely. And so you did not have an ID card. So you will be considered absentee, which means the occupation has access to your property and everything. But I do remember that the father of the soldier came, because I remember this guy comes to our house and they take him to the reception room or auditorium. And my dad was at work. My mom called him. And then he comes and he's Jordanian. And they had saved, he had a watch, some little few dinars, and his ID. And they gave him back. And he was Jordanian. He said, "Yani for Palestine, our honor." So they gave him back his papers and so on. And he's buried in Nablus. Nobody ever moved his body somewhere else. He's part of the martyrs for Palestine. So his remains buried in Nablus. And when we go, I've been away for a long time. But when we go visit the graves on the Eid, that's when people go for any Eid, we always stop at the graves of the martyrs, whether you go to the Wasqiyya, the mass grave, or there are graves in most cemeteries in the Eastern and the Western. You stop at the graves of the martyrs, and you remember them, and if you're Muslim, you read the Fatiha for them, and you honor all the martyrs at the same time that you honor your family as well. So nobody forgets. You see a lot of people standing in line, everybody trying to make space for everybody else. So because they are part of the people who sacrifice for us. So the people who are either known or not known, you go and honor them. So this was part of what's going on. I remember, like we were before the occupation, we used to have the merry-go-round. We used to go in the Eid, we get new clothes. Sometimes the two Eids the same clothes, but we have at least for the first one. And we go to my aunt's house and we get the Eid money for the Eid and, eat the meal with each other. And if it's the Eid after Ramadan, Eid al-Fitr, of course, you break your fast and so on. But after the occupation, none of that. I mean, you go to visit the family and you go, of course, to the grave, but that's it. There is no, and I remember that there was no more anyway. There wasn't the amusement park. It wasn't there anymore. But also we didn't go. My family was very shocked and very mourning. My mom started wearing black. She decided she wasn't going to cut her hair for a very long time. And of course, when Abdel Nasser died, the mourning continued. It was that, why are you running? Why are you smiling? Why are you laughing? And don't you know there are martyrs? Don't you know there are prisoners and so on? And so it was for us too. And yes, it was a year off. Maybe I'll just say maybe one thing that it was also my first time doing a hunger strike. I mean, for me, it wasn't really a hunger strike. I was a little kid. And I insisted my mom and her friends, they went and do a real hunger strike in the mosque, Jamal Abdel Nasser, which is very close to our house and the Eastern Cemetery. And I kept saying, I want to go. And then my mom said, okay, come. But she said, you cannot have a whole fast. You do the fast, Darajat al-Maidani, which is like the steps of the minaret, which means that you fast and then you break your fast every time of the prayers. I said, okay, better than nothing. I'll go. And it was good that they did it this way because I would not have lasted anyway. So I fasted. I went with the women. We sat in the mosque and they did the sit-in. And so we did that with the hunger strike. And so I used to see my mom's friends always. They would all come to the door. They have petitions. Sometimes they're sewing schemas. They're doing all sorts of things. And we'll see them. But you don't say anything. Kind of like you learn as a young child that there's certain things you don't ask about. And certain things when, I don't know if the adults told us not to ask and we stopped asking, but I know we weren't asked. We did not ask about things. And in the midst of it, I do know that like my cousin came to our house and he talked to my mom and took a shower, changed his clothes, and then he said, I'm going to go to my mom. His mom's house was in Ramallah. And my mom said, oh, let me call her. I said, no, I want to surprise her. And so he went to Ramallah al-Bira to my aunt's house. And then in a few days, we heard that he was arrested. So he was arrested and tortured and sentenced to 7 years in prison by Israel. And it turned out that he was one of the freedom fighters who infiltrated from Jordan to the West Bank. But that time, my aunt was not allowed to leave to Jordan. And she had several house arrests. She was arrested. town arrest. Her children were not allowed to come to Palestine. They had different levels of participation in the movement, Palestinian liberation movement. She wasn't allowed to go visit them. So when you have visitation to prison, you are allowed, I think, 2 or 3 or sometimes the family members at that time. So my mom and my aunt will go visit, and I asked to go with them. So I used to go to the various visitations. So I actually learned all the prisons throughout Palestine and the 48 areas, because I went to them and I saw the degrees of how the prison developed, if you will, in a negative way, from sitting with the prisoner to actually being so far away from them, from being able to touch, like my aunt will hug her son, to having this huge barbed wire between them. You could bring them food at the beginning and close. Now you can't. You put money in the canteen. And of course, now the situation of the prisoners is so much worse. So it was like 7 years. And I think it was once a month, the visit, unless when the Israelis decide that they're going to punish the prisoners or there is a hunger strike. So they're punishing them more and they prevent the visit. So this was all the things that I remember. I remember other things, but let me stop because you may actually want to, as I talk too much.
No, it's great. I think I could just sit back and listen to you the whole time, to be honest. Just to go back to the Jordanian rule, there had to be some sort of dissonance for you. Are they there to help us, or are they not there to help us? Are they there to protect us or not? What did you end up concluding throughout that period?
I did not, and I never had any hesitation. I always knew they were not there to help us.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody was against them, and everybody was familiar 100% with that. The king of the grandfather of King Hussein, King Abdullah, had signed the Jericho agreement with Palestinians, basically selling out the West Bank to Jordan. He was killed by a Palestinian because of that. And so everybody thought of him as a traitor. I mean, in our surroundings, there was no question whatsoever about him. And this was my upbringing. We did not like him. We supported Abdel Nasser. And when I went from one school to the other, my school childhood friend and I led a little demonstration. It was maybe 12 of us walking around in our blue and white uniforms. And it was like really stupid. Like we threw stones at the boys' school to try to see if they will come out with us. Nobody did. And I went and messed up the image of King Hussein in the curriculum. And the school, the headmistress, Kamala Harris, asked for whoever is in charge of me. My dad was traveling, so she called my uncle and she said she's not well behaved and so on. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't respect him. He's a traitor, Ryan. And she's like shocked. She's shocked that I'm talking back, and she's shocked that I'm actually disrespecting the king of the lands, Well, my uncle was not really as kind of radical as my dad. So this was continued in school. And every time in school, I have so then this was before the Israeli occupation. So it was, for me, it was no question. But when I moved from one school, from Jamila Buhayred, to the other school, Banat Nablus, which was still before the occupation, elementary, because Jamila Buhayred finished at the 5th grade, and then we had to go for the 6th grade to another school, Banat Nablus, where Kamar Bushnat is. There were a lot of girls whose families had good relations with King Hussein. So one girl would say, oh, I'm so happy. My dad lights a cigarette of King Hussein. And like I said, what are you proud of? He's a traitor. I mean, this is what I was trained. And of course, I was then told by my parents, you don't really need to dish out everything you felt. And of hold some things back to yourself. But I was thinking that everybody's like us. I didn't know that there were people who did not believe that way, because this is the menu that I was grown up, and I was a little kid. I didn't know. Then I realized that not everybody was like him, but it didn't last long. It was 1 year before the Israeli occupation came. And then whatever with King Hussein was no longer relevant. It was, now we have Israeli occupation. And then the whole question about the relatives who were arrested and who came back, it was thrown in my mind. Like even now, when I think about that, and I think about them, like, what's wrong with Ammu Hatem? He comes back, has lost like 12 kilos. Mm-hmm. And he has been in prison. When I started reading at an older age about the prison memoirs from different places, from whether Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and other places, I kind of understand what was going on at that time. Like people live here. I didn't know, but I did know that something bad was happening to them. And that these people and these army troops that come to our house maybe stand outside or something. This is not a joke. So we were definitely, these all of the people were going to liberate Palestine. Definitely there was a lot of love for Abdel Nasser and disappointment.
Yeah, just for the guests, the audience,
Yeah.
can you just talk about Abdel Nasser briefly?
Yeah, Jamal Abdel Nasser was a leader of Egypt. He and the other military captains, they were for the Free Officers Movement. In 952, they led an overthrow of King Farouk, who was also part of this old ancien regime in all of the Arab world monarchies, and very corrupt, and very much relied upon the colonialism, British colonialism in this case. And so they overthrew King Farouk, and they took over, and they began to try to improve the conditions in the country and the conditions of the Arab world. So one of the things that they began to do, for example, it was the nationalized Suez Canal, which they did that in 1956. And then that's when the Israel, France, and Britain waged an attack against Egypt to say you cannot nationalize, as if the Suez Canal is something that belongs to Britain, because Britain actually forced the Egyptian when they were ruling to open the Suez Canal with Egyptian labor. But they felt that they owned it. So he nationalized it. They got really upset. And basically, Israel actually went into a Palestinian village named Kufr Qasim and committed a massacre, killed the villagers who were coming back from where they didn't even know there was a curfew. They went to Gaza and killed Palestinians in Gaza in order to try to prevent them from rising up. When there was the war between Egypt and Israel. In 1955, for example, Nasser, Nehru, Nairiri, several leaders in the third world, newly decolonized countries, sat together and created the non-aligned country of leaders of the third world to try to figure out how they can be non-aligned, whether with the Soviet Union or the United States, and to create something like Samir Amin, the late philosopher and economist, said the non-capitalist path to development. So they were seriously about how can we be independent, really, not only politically independent because they were decolonized, but how can we be independent and make ourselves non-aligned, independent. So Nasser was one of the leaders. He was also the leader of the Arab world. He was nationalist, and it's called, his philosophy is called Nasseritism, and different than the Arab nationalists. They were very close with him, but they did not 100% agree with him. There were some agreements. He was also very close with the other Palestinian big movement, Fatah. He was also very close and supported both. And he also invested and created the Palestinian Liberation Army. So he was very supportive of Palestine liberation, of all the Arab world. He created the unity with Syria, but it fell apart because I believe that it was too soon. And it's not only me. A lot of people, analysts, say that was too soon. They should have actually built it more. They should have had the grassroots involved in it, not just by an agreement. Unity doesn't get done by it. But he was really a leader. He did a lot of, he built the high dam over Aswan it did affect the local communities because it destroyed a lot of places. So the discussions we have today about environment and indigenous communities and so on, had they been having them at that time, I'm sure they would have done it differently, but they did in order to have the water of the Nile River. There is improved a lot of people, the literacy, the women's, the teaching, the jobs, trying to get rid of diseases like dysentery, which is really bad for Egyptian farmers and so on. So there were a lot of, let's say, reform in the agrarian and so on. There were a lot of possibilities to do something like nationalizing the project, and didn't live long enough. And there is also criticism of Nasser that he was, the rule was from top down rather than kind of like making it also from the down top, kind of like making it grassroots and so on. There were sometimes crushing the opposition too harshly, unless especially, for example, the Muslim Brotherhood movement, which is part of the history of Hamas and Islamic Jihad and so on, which should have been done differently. And this is a critique of many of the nationalist historical regimes and so on. So, but he was really loved in Palestine. The people in Palestine really loved him. He was the leader of the Arab world. And Jamal Abdel Nasser, so he was really loved in Palestine, even though Egypt, Syria, Jordan, of course. People wonder if Jordan really lost the war or Jordan was already planning to lose the war. I mean, they do not know about that. But for Nasser, there was intent to win the war, and there are still questions about the history, how much treason was there, how much preparation Egypt has, how much strength has the Israeli military. There is all sorts of discussions about it. Nonetheless, he was very beloved leader.
Yeah.
And he resigned when they lost the war. He actually resigned. But all the Arab world rose up and said, we don't accept your resignation. So he came back, but he was very beloved. So in any case, everybody loved him. So this is what the part of my family, that they loved Abdel Nasser, but also they were not, obviously they weren't 100% with Abdel Nasser because they were with the Arab National Movement.
Yeah.
So I talked to them and I interviewed them later in life before they passed away, but they didn't really like to talk much. Like my dad would give me 1 hour interview and say, Schulz, Fakini. He just didn't really. So I get it from other people. Like my mom would tell me things, my aunt, my cousins, but he didn't. And my mom's like, why do you need this for? I'm like, for my work. Oh, I don't really like to talk. And so you only hear it from other members of the family and so on. They thought it's really important to preserve history, except their own. So, and this is always like our elders don't do that. But I went and asked many people and so on. I got it from as much people as possible, but not everything I would have liked to get. So, yeah. So this is what was happening about Abdel Nasser and about Jordan and yeah.
Yeah. So Zeina, I don't think we learned any of this at George Mason, or I don't think our kids are learning this. This is pretty good stuff.
Absolutely. This is amazing. And it's coming from a very personal perspective. So, and firsthand knowledge. So it's really powerful and important.
Yeah. And were you in the U.S. or were you still in Palestine during the Sabra and Shatila massacre?
No, I was in the U.S.
You're in the
I was already studying in the U.S. and I was already active. I was active first in the Arab Student Union. I was at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I was elected as the president of the Arab Student Union. And the Arab Student Union was the Madison chapter of the Organization of Arab Students, which was the biggest and one of the most strong and well-respected and rooted student organization, but it was also an activist organization in the community. And it was on its way to fall apart. It was basically, there were a lot of factions in it. They were falling apart. And at that time, around the same time, 1978, Yasser Arafat issued a decree to create the General Union of Palestinian Students and the General Union of Palestinian Women. So the General Union of Palestinian Students was coming to Madison, and there was the Arab Student Union. I wasn't as enthusiastic about the General Union of Palestinian Students, even though I went to BZ for like 2 months in the summer. And I was very much for students. I was very active, whatever I could be active in. But I prefer to be in an Arab body than just an Arab-Palestinian body. But I joined. Of course, I joined. I attended the first convention. So I was at the founding convention of the General Union of Palestinian Students. But yeah, so I was thinking, but OIS was falling apart anyway. It wasn't going to happen. Arab Student Union was like falling apart. I stayed in it. I continued being active, and we had Lebanese, Kuwaiti, Syrians, Libyans from all over the Arab world. And we were always working with each other. We very active, very strong net. Actually, one of our friends, Kuwaiti, and one of the years, I think 1980, he cut off the wire from the electric station of the Hillel, who were celebrating Israeli foundation, the Nakba, and he was arrested and he was punished by the university. All of the students were incredibly wonderful, and so on the Arab Student Union. Anyway, in GOBS, who were active in GOBS, and Sabra and Shatila, and I was really throughout the summer, I was very active. And the whole thing, we were part of a student slate called Students for Positive Change. We allied with students from all over, everywhere, Black students, white students, anti-nuclear students, peace, everybody, women. We had a big coalition. We did all the buttons in different languages, including Arabic, and we won the student government. Because at that time, there was a big debate between us and the Moonies, who were right-wing students headed by the Moon, Reverend Sun Myung Moon, which was part Korean, but also very right-wing. We actually defeated them. We took over the student government. And we started doing the programs that we promised the students to do: education, collaboration with each other, connecting, having cultural events with each other. It was really beautiful. So the summer comes and the invasion of Lebanon starts and the siege of Beirut. So we started connecting with everybody and doing so many activities on the lawn, educationals. We brought so many speakers to campus. It was just, every week. And if there are no speakers in the big room that has 500 people, will have them on the lawn. Constant, and it's just not just Palestinian. We were small number. Then everybody's staffing the tables. Everybody is doing all these activities. And then, so we were following everything. And then Sabra and Shatila happened. And of course, we did what we needed to do. We did a funeral, a symbolic funeral. But for me, it changed my life overnight. For me, I came to the realization that what's the point of education? What's the point of life? Why are we doing all of this? Before that, before Sabra and Shatila, I was trying to go to Lebanon. I was trying to volunteer to go to Lebanon. And I kept really pressuring my elders to go, please send me to Lebanon. Please send me to Lebanon. And they were really right, but they kept saying, what skills do you have? And I said, I can do whatever they did. What skills? Do you know nursing? I said, no. Or do you know how to shoot? I said, I've never carried a gun. What can you do? I said, well, I can translate research for whom? Well, I can write it's like shooting, and this is what I can cook. I said, there's a lot of people who can cook. And they said, honestly, you will only go there and the fighters will trip on you. Seriously, they said, but tatarufiki. So if you really want to help, you don't really need to do what you feel like doing. You need to do what the movement needs you for. You can speak, you have information, you can connect with other groups, you stay here, and you do this work because this is what the movement needs you for. You don't do what you feel like in your mind. And I was disciplined, I listened, I followed, and I always wanted to go, and I'm kind of reluctant. I obeyed, okay? But they were right. They were right. And that wouldn't have been good for me, wouldn't have been good for the movement. I would have been just realizing my own selfish and interest, but it wouldn't have been good for the movement. So I stayed, but I couldn't stay in school. To me, it was going to classes, and then when you see all these images on TV of the people dying, and it's I really wanted to be active.
Yeah.
So I organized, I was involved with the national movement called November 29th Coalition, which has started in 1981. It was the biggest demonstration in the U.S. national on the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. And my colleagues and I, a whole bunch of us, rode buses and joined the Chicago group community to go to New York, and we participated in it and so on. And then when the invasion of Lebanon started, the coalition was supposed to be only for that. It was over 100 organizations that endorsed it. But when the invasion of Lebanon started, the Lebanese and the Palestinians, primarily in New York and Washington, D.C., but New York primarily, but also around the country, basically revived the coalition. And they made it an ongoing coalition to lead the movement in the summer to basically work around, to oppose the Israeli invasion, to oppose U.S. support, to support the people in Lebanon and the people who are fighting and so on. So we created chapters in Madison and Milwaukee. So we wanted to do teach-ins because that's what they were doing elsewhere. So we were calling them in New York and saying, can you please get us a speaker from the African National Congress? Can you get us a speaker from the FMLN? And they say, yes, but they're not. But then one time, there was a group from Milwaukee going to New York for their own conference, a leftist group. They said, do you have space in the bus? Can I go with you? They said, okay, yes. I said, okay, I went with them. And I went with them to get the speakers, to get my speakers. That's just to make sure I can go to the November 29th Coalition, get my speakers, because they weren't giving me speakers. Well, me have to do the event successfully. So sure enough, I met people here in the community in New York, and I got my speakers and then they were asking, what do you want to do? I said, I don't know, because Madison is a university city. I want to be an activist, an organizer. I don't think, there's limitations to it. If you're not a student or a scholar, what you're going to do in a university city? And this guy told me, why don't you come to New York? This is big enough. You can actually become an organizer. You can find a place. You can work. And I said, okay. I don't have any commitments in medicine. I'll come. So I moved, brought my one kitchen bag, left everything behind, and came to New York. Of course, they helped me become an organizer, but not find a job or housing. Yeah. So I started organizing, and we're here today. So
I want to jump into your experience. Obviously, when you moved here from an educational perspective and a workforce perspective, right? I would be remiss if I didn't ask you first about your aunt. And I know Zeina is a huge fan of your aunt. I think if I got it right, she ran against Yasser Arafat in '96, correct? Zeina, do you want to?
No, I mean, I think the perspective here, I didn't know the relationship there. And to me, growing up in Palestine in the first Intifada Khalil was a big deal because she did run one of the most successful, if not the most successful, a community support network and system that helped orphans and that helped the average person in Palestine, specifically in Ramallah and the neighboring cities and towns and villages. So, she was larger than life for many of us growing up, learning about somebody who has worked with the grassroots, with the people, hand in hand. And so I wanted to ask you about how that influenced your life, if at all, but also to kind of a little bit talk more about the feminism and feminist perspective that you grew up in, because you were empowered in many ways. You did see women figures, leaders around you. And so I would love to hear more about that. And then I have one other quick question about the feminist perspective as to the current situation. But would love to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah. I mean, when you call her Khalil, I grew up calling her Khatu Samiha. So because my mom had two sisters, and they were very tight. They loved each other a lot. And I was the eldest. And then after me, my brother, we have two pairs of twins. So the brothers are 2.5 years younger than me. So they all were closer to my other cousins from my dad's side in Nablus. So I didn't have anybody my age in Nablus. So I was always latching on and following the kids of my aunt Samiha. And they were much older. And then my other aunt Fatima, she was in Amman. So we will see her, but we wouldn't see her as much as Samiha. And I don't know, it was her decision or my mom, but they used to send me every summer to spend at least 2-3 weeks with her in Ramallah. It was like really beautiful for me. So I would sit, and she has all these people coming to her house, and she's sitting, and I'm just sitting there. And she never ever told me, you're curfew, you have to go to sleep. So I'm just sitting and listening. I'm just never tell me go to sleep or something. And it's all the people that you see their names in the paper and the books and so on. And she's conversing with them. They're plotting on one thing or another. And so it was amazing. So I learned all of that. But so she was my aunt, but I was very influenced. Before even my aunt, I was influenced, let's say, I'll go back to the women. I was very influenced by my cousins, her children. My cousins were all that I said they were all political, and they were all in various degrees involved, and they were not allowed to come to Palestine. And she wasn't allowed to go. So she was arrested by Israel. She was spent time in prison. She was beaten, even though she was much older. She had house arrest. She has town arrest. I mean, she was defiant. She didn't take any prisoners. She never, ever compromised with them. But her children, when they were able to come from college, they taught me so much. Like my youngest cousin, Samia, he's the one who taught me when Che Guevara died. And when Sheikh Imam and Ahmed Fuad Nijm did the song about him, Guevara Mat. Like, that's how I learned from them. They will sit down and they'll talk about things. Samir was commissioning in Italy. Samir was may they rest in peace, because Samir and Samir also died. He was in Romania. Saida also passed away. She was studying in Egypt, and then she lived in Algeria. It was very close. She and my other cousin, Habir, they took me to see Love Story, first time in Nablus, in Vernata movie theater. So they kind of Saji was in prison. Khalil, we saw him, he was much older, but he would come and visit us in Nablus. So for me, they were like my brothers. They were my older brothers, my saviors, my kind of, I looked up to them Like they were, but this is one thing. They were elder, and both Said and Abir from Jordan, and my aunt Fatima in Amman. They used to call her Fidaiyin because she was, even in 1970, she used to hide the Fidaiyin in her house, and she would get fired from the Jordanian Ministry of Social Affairs 2 months before she was going to retire. I mean, this is okay. So these are the women, the two aunts and my mom. These are the women in my life, very strong, very tough. And their relationship with the men, like my mom's relationship with my dad, was amazing. They fell in love when they were 14 years old. And there is nobody rules anybody. A lot of love, a lot of respect for each other, a lot of arguments. We never ever said somebody rules over somebody. We never. We always stand up and speak. But we do not know that shut up. We don't know that. We've taught. So even whenever my parents tell me something, I said, why you taught us? And that's the easiest thing to kind of argue back. Didn't you teach me to do this? Didn't you do this? Like my dad, what you call it, smuggled flyers for the Arab national movement to be read on his honeymoon. So don't come and tell me do not get involved in this and that. And you don't have a leg to stand on. So they were very involved, but the women, like, yeah, my dad, very nationalist, very involved and so on. But the women were so tough. Definitely, like we never ever bought potato chips in the 48 areas. We always went to see the land Caesarine, which is the land that was gone. We went to see the building we had in Haifa. It's gone. But we even filled the gas from Qalqilia. It's true it comes from Israel. But you fill from Qalqilia, from a Palestinian gas station. Nothing. We go to places, for example, Sahne or something. Everybody from Nablus, you see them buying, and we say, Mama, no. You want to buy from Israel? These are the people killed, the martyrs, and this is why your cousin is in prison. No way. I mean, it is not allowed to even bring juice or something. Who would this? She actually makes, and I never did. But like my brother, you have to go take it to the grocery store. Yeah, Mama, they don't, I don't know. You bought it, you have to go. I mean, this is, and very strong. She spoke to people, like clearly about her politics and so on, and not as prominent and in terms of leadership and so on, like my aunt, because my aunt, her husband was working and then retired and passed away early on. My mom, she and her dad, my dad, were very close and so on. So she did not have as much time, and she decided, it was her decision. But she was also a leader, a president of an association, elected. And then she ran for a few times, and then she decided, I'm not going to run anymore because other people should have the chance to be leaders and so on. But my aunt came to our house all the time. They didn't always agree. Like when my dad decided to run for president against Arafat, my mom was against it. And in one of the documentaries, she said, my sister lost 3 kilos. It was my mom because she was very worried about her. Yeah, Samiha, Balash, don't do it. She was so worried about her. And she tried to convince her. But honestly, like my dad was supporting. My brothers were supportive. Her children were supportive of her running. But it's her decision. And everybody said, you cannot tell Samiha what to do. You cannot, because she convinced my grandfather to let her go study at the French school and stay in a dorm overnight by herself. And my dad was Sheikh Al-Kubbaj, who was the Sheikh and he is the head of the city council in Anabta. He was a very big time Sheikh, was very close to Al-Mufti, and he used to give all his money, fight with them and so on. Very strong, very tough. And she convinced him to allow her to go outside to study at French school. How did she do it? She was able to do it. I mean, she did not take no for an answer. Nobody can change her. This is what she decided to do. And she said, this is what I'm going to do. And she did it. And she didn't. She got 13% of the vote, which is a lot because we all know, those of us who grew up there, that Abu Ammar was not fond of people who challenged him. Did not like people to challenge him. And also he kept saying, okay, Khalil. We know that he would have preferred that Khalil did not turn against him. But he couldn't say anything about her because of her position. She was really formidable. And I think what she did for Inash al-Usra was amazing because the building this association, she always said that I'm not a feminist, by the way. She would always say, I'm not a feminist. And we said, okay, so what do you have in an national? So she said, oh, we got all these orphan girls who have their fathers might be martyrs or prisoners, but also they're orphaned. Or there is the women who, like maybe they're divorced or their husbands left or something. Bring the women in and have them go to the vocational schools. They have multiple vocational schools or learn how to read online. So they have an income. So you're doing all of this stuff. This is not feminism. So what is it? And she's like, if that somebody, she would, and I saw her, like somebody mistreats his wife. She'll bring him in and say, why are you beating your wife? I mean, in front of everybody. Well, are you going to stop? You need to promise me that you're going to stop. I mean, like in front of everybody. So it's very interesting when she sits and starts like theorizing in front of the family. This feminism coming from the West, we're so against them. And we're all start shaking our heads, our children and us. What are you talking about? And I think it's because of this image of it. But for me, this is the milieu I grew up in. Plus that my brothers, me and my sister were having in the house the same chores as my brothers. We were never, ever treated less than my brothers. We never, ever in everything. And my dad and my mom were for them, education was so important. It was not allowed. You cannot get married before you get an education. Don't even think about it. And we didn't think about it. But it wasn't allowed. You have to depend on yourself. You cannot be depending on a man for your income. I mean, there were certain things that were grained in our heads. So sometimes I catch myself, so like I'm acting all the time like I'm equal, right? And sometimes I feel people are not comfortable. And then it hits me, oh my, yeah. There is, some folks are not trained that way. So that's why they're behaving that way. It doesn't make me change my behavior. Makes me maybe a little bit like, maybe try to be gentler and so on, to take people along because we want to change society, and so all society wants to change. But it is an environment that you get trained in. And this is, I mean, everywhere, the women's movement is so strong, and it exemplifies that in every single way. They don't need to get up on a soapbox and make speeches. In every single thing they do, there is so much social solidarity. And by the way, the women would not have been able to make it if the men in our society were not equally committed and were equal. I'm not saying every single man. We have tons of misogyny. We have a lot of sexism. We have a lot of guys who interrupt and think that they know everything. We have that, definitely. But we also have a lot, young and old, and also from everywhere, who are so nice, so committed, so gentle, so wonderful. So it's just like the salt of the earth that this people will say it's like women against men. It's not true. That is not. That's in people's maybe imagination, who want to only just fight, but they don't really want to accomplish goals in society. And that's not what our society is all about. I mean, we're surviving over 100 years of colonialism against all odds, and we're still here. So, yeah.
So with the campaign now in the U.S. to shift a little bit to more recent times, since we have a woman who, there's a chance that a woman and a woman of color might be elected into U.S. government here. And I'm always fascinated they're running on reproductive rights and women's rights and women's empowerment. But at the same time, we see what's happening in Gaza, juxtaposing this to what's happening in Gaza to women and men and children. But how is Western feminism different? How has it hit you? I mean, how do you see it? Where are the shortcomings in this conversation, to say the least?
Can I just jump in really quick and just say, I think Dr. Abdulhadi crushed every stereotype and every trope about Palestinian women in those 3 minutes. Would you agree, Zeina?
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
I'm not an exception.
Yes.
We have thousands and millions of women that every single day they defy the stereotypes. The problem is that the stereotypes sticking to us because of the way the word works. We need to keep fighting against it. Thank you. And thank you for this question. I don't think that Kamala Harris represents Western feminism or what it is. I mean, I think I would say she represents colonial feminism. And I actually don't think that she stood up for reproductive freedom. She has been in the government for 4 years, and the Biden administration, including her, did not do much around Roe v. Wade. They sold us a lot of talk, but they did not do much about that. They did not do much about anything about healthcare. They did not do much about education. They did not do much about jobs. They did not do much about housing. They didn't do anything about the recent floods. In North Carolina, people are homeless, and they actually demand that they pay for their housing or get evicted. They don't have money. They don't have money, and they won't give FEMA the money, yet they're using the billions and billions of dollars to send to Israel to engage in genocide. She is a law and order, quote unquote, and she prides on it. And I know her because she ran for mayor, for a district attorney in San Francisco. She always prided herself on arresting more people and protecting the interests of the dot-commers, the cash money people who actually came to San Francisco and emptied, and I wouldn't call it gentrification because that means gentry, but emptied the town of people and took their places. This is what Kamala Harris is. She has nothing to do with the wellness of the people. And so when she stands up and says that I am a woman of color, my mom is from East Asia and so on, and I want to say to her, please do not use identity politics to try to sell us something that has nothing to do with the grassroots people that you claim you represent, because you don't represent them. This is not what Black women fought for. This is not what South Asian women fought for. This is not what immigrants stands for. You're actually spoiling their legacy of all these people and riding on their shoulders in order for you to win individually something that only benefits you individually. And you are responding and accountable to Goldman Sachs, which she said in the debate, the first one, she said, you are responding to the prison people, you're responding to the military industries, you're not responding. And so when you actually stand with Israel, genocide against the Palestinian people, to me, it makes sense because you are standing against people here in this country. You're standing against them and against their own interests and in favor of those who are deprived them from their interests. You cannot say to me that I worry about the children in Gaza, I worry about people, and yet send another shipment of weapons. It doesn't make sense. If you worry, you stop the weapons, because weapons kill. You want to stop the killing, you stop the killing machines. As simple as that. A little child understands that. So this is where she is at. And this is the problem. So just to expand on that a little about colonial feminism, the problem with that is that it's called feminism. Feminism implies something good. So big part of our problem with that is because we have to actually counter something that is implied to have goodness in it. So we're not talking about people who are saying, I'm racist. We'll say, okay, you're a racist. But it's supposed to give produce liberation for women. The problem is that the recipes for colonial feminism doesn't even produce liberation for the majority of the women in this country. Benefits, again, the interests of the very small lives of women in this country who are occupying the top of the pyramid in Washington, D.C. And by the way, not even equally, because they're not equal to their spouses or their partners. We're not. So, and then at the expense of the 99% of the people in the United States and around the world. So when they speak and when they talk, they're so ignorant. I mean, I think you have all this money. Take a class. Just like, don't you think that at least you should know what you're talking about? Because many times they speak and they sound so ignorant that Google it. Check something before you speak because you should know what you are talking about. The other problem with that is that what they do is so damaging because they justify for the U.S. intervention and for the U.S. killing machines what they are doing. So when they get up and they keep repeating, for example, what Israel said, and then Biden repeated it, that 40 heads of Palestinian with children, Israeli children were chopped, that Israel burned the child, and also the new thing that they're all Palestinians engaged in mass rape in Gaza, which we know is not true. And today, there is an article in Mundo Wise published by the Feminist Solidarity Network for Palestine that goes through all the lies that the New York Times reproduced and that the Israeli government made claims. And you see all the contradictions. They say one thing here, they say something else. All the people who are supposed to give testimonies are actually lying, but they're supposed to be the paper of records did not verify the records. And then they keep repeating. The reason they keep repeating it again and again, because, as you said, that the whole thing, there is the stereotypes that all Arab and Muslim men and Palestinian men, by extension, are all already they're rapists, they're misogynists, they're sexist, they're homophobic, they're bloodthirsty, they're terrorists. They have no appreciation for humanity. Of course, they're going to be rapists. Of course. So then the picture is already set. So you just plug in, and anything that they say is understood. It doesn't matter how many images you show of Israeli soldiers going into people's homes and taking the women's underwear and so on. It doesn't matter how many reports we get from the doctors, Israeli doctors, in Sdit Taman, talking about the rape of Palestinian prisoners by making them sit on sharp material. It doesn't matter how many testimonies we get from Palestinian women in prisons that they've been raped and abused and mistreated, or children. It doesn't matter, because all of this stuff they throw in the garbage, because this image and the same image of the exceptional Palestinian women, it is the overarching image in their heads. So no matter what we say, the same image keeps continuing again and again. And then you come in as a Palestinian man, for example, you have to fight against this overarching image for you to be human, just to be human, just to be human, just to be, just so somebody not be afraid of you and say, oh my God, you're going to, at best, hate me, at best. And this is the same image that's constructed for the black man. This is the same image that's constructed for the Latino man, for the African man, for the Asian man, for any man of color. This is the same. It's the same. I mean, this is the images about Geronimo and indigenous people who fight. You stand up and you speak for yourself. You are no longer, because a good Palestinian is a dead Palestinian. You stand up and you speak for yourself. You become condemned, because you become then the enemy that you already have been constructed before you even arrive at the scene. And for the women, the same thing, because we're supposed to be docile, and we're supposed to be stupid, and we're supposed to be silenced, and we're supposed to be abused. So if one of us speaks, we already defy all of this. Now we're no longer feminine. We're no longer women. We are already being too aggressive and too nasty and this and that. So it defies. So we cannot actually be like everybody or other women with all diversity. So it becomes really, so look how many layers we actually have to fight on, in addition to be able to support our people who are being massacred every single day in the worst genocide that we're witnessing in our lifetime.
Zeina, I think I'm going to send my twin daughters to Dr. Abdulhadi just for a training for a few weeks, if that's okay with you.
أهلا وسهلا ومئة ألف مرحبا.
So you've faced many attacks on within your department at SFSU. In 2007, your course on Palestine was canceled. 2016, I believe it was, there was an attack using posters depicting you in some sort of negative fashion. In 2017, the Lawfare Project filed a lawsuit against the university and claiming that and you, yep. And the university had to publicly acknowledge that Zionism is an important aspect of Jewish identity, which blows my mind. That makes no sense. And then in 2020, even, you tried to create a program or a course, I believe, for Layla Khalid, but Zoom, Facebook, and Google shut it down. And then recently, Wake Forest, after you booked your ticket, after you set up everything, they did cancel it, but you all pivoted, obviously. How are you navigating all of that all the time? It just feels like you're under attack. And I don't know about you, Zeina. I don't know if I could take that much attack. And so, I mean, how are you navigating that?
And it never gets okay, and you never get used to it. Some people say, Some people always say to me, you're Palestinian, you must get used to it in general. And I say, no, we never get used to it. We also love to live, love, think, have a good life, all of us. So we don't get used to it ever, ever. And for me, I never get used to it. And every single time, anytime this happens, it stresses me out. It makes me very angry. I shudder at the injustice of it all. And I know that it's wrong. I know that it is wrong. The smearing is wrong. The attacks are wrong. The attempt to shut me up and to all of us, silence us all, is wrong. The attempt to criminalize Palestine in the curriculum is wrong. And it's very vicious, it's very nasty, and it is intended in order to justify what Israel is doing by preventing people here from hearing our stories. This is basically from hearing ourselves, because if you construct me as a terrorist, if you construct me as Horowitz says, Jew hatred, I'm Jew hatred and I'm terrorist and so on, then I become this monster that nobody can see me as a human being. And I think this is why Wake Forest, this is why the Zionist kids, the students made this campaign, so nobody can see me in a human light and be able to talk with me and maybe even hear a little bit of what I'm saying making sense to them. And I think also this is why all the Zionist lawfare, by the way, led the attack to shut down our open classroom with Layla Khalid, because they want to keep her as a monster, not a 76-year-old grandmother. And so she cannot talk to people and see, oh, wow, this is a grandmother. It's impossible to do that. They sent 19,000 messages on an app called ACT-IL, ACT Israel, from the Ministry of Strategic Affairs and their various, because none of this happens very fast, unless you have minions waiting to do it, right? Because you cannot allow Palestinians to appear as humans. This is the reason, by the way, that they never host Palestinians. They always host in a very combative way. And then a couple of people under them, they always talk about us and they quote the Israeli military, the spokespeople and so on. But they never, very rarely do they have a human story or anything about Palestinians that are in all walks of life. So it's not, I don't think it's okay. And it really has a very heavy cost on you. But I have to tell you, I'm not doing anything wrong. I am speaking my mind. I'm actually doing what I was hired to do. I'm an educator. I was hired to educate. I'm doing the job that I was hired to do. If San Francisco State changed its mind and reneged on what they hired me to do, that's their problem. It's not my problem. I'm sticking to what I was hired to do, and I'm continuing to educate. They have a problem with it. They have a problem with my Palestine course, and they cancel it at the last minute. That's their problem. Of course, what they do is they affect me in my pocket because I'm not getting the income. But I launched the class last summer, and I have 564 students sign up for it, which San Francisco State loses the tuition income from. Their problem, I asked them multiple times, and we had an excellent class, wonderful. But I'm not going to silence the voice of Palestine. Wake Forest canceled, and they canceled because what they said, nobody should be doing anything on October 7th. It's a solemn occasion. And I said, you're crazy. Everybody is going to talk about October 7th. If you're alive and don't think of what happened on October 7th, you must be sleeping. Everybody is going to talk about it. So everybody else is allowed to talk about it, but Palestinians can't. So when they did this and they canceled me, I said, I'm going. The university, you contracted me. I'm going. I don't care what the Zionists say, and I don't care what Wake Forest said. I went, and I talked to the people who hosted me, and the university said to them, if she doesn't come, if she agrees to be silent, we will give her the honorarium, and we will pay for the expenses that she incurred. If she decides to come, she gets nothing. She doesn't get compensation. She doesn't get the honorarium. And the third thing, maybe we'll do something in the future. And I told them, keep all of these things. I am not for sale. And I talked to my colleagues, and they said, we agree. Well, both of us. I'm coming, and they're receiving me. So I went. I took a flight, went to North Carolina. We had an event. We actually had more people because the whole hosted filled 100. We had 130. It was a beautiful event with everybody from the community, from all walks of life, students, professors, young people, activists, church folks, Jewish folks, Muslim folks, everybody, union members, everybody was there. It was so warm and so lovely. And I felt like the love coming at me. Such a successful, wonderful event. That is better than the cold place of the university. Not that they are allowed, they should have done it, no. And I was able to speak at the Winston-Salem University, which is a historically Black university, in a class. And also I was able to give a lecture there. We met with the students, several students, met with faculty. It was beautiful. And what was most beautiful about it is that we did not allow them to shut us up. Palestine was not silenced. There is no way, with all the sacrifices we make, we cannot be silenced. And so you have to do something like this, because if I didn't do it, I would feel so defeated. But is this okay? No, it's not okay. We have to keep fighting against it. And we cannot allow the silencing to continue, because they're using all sorts of disciplinary measures against the students, against faculty, against all sorts of laws and so on. It's fascism. It's really becoming like any kind of the times of Nazism, the time of fascism, McCarthyism. We cannot allow that to happen. We cannot. And if we don't, those of us who are able to do it, do not do it, and do not model it for the younger people, what are they learning? If they see Rabab Abdulhadi chickens out and doesn't respond, why should they? I mean, it's a heavy burden. And I'm not saying that it's okay. It's not okay. It's really difficult. And it's not fair. It shouldn't happen at all. But they are going to attack. The only thing we can do is to respond and accept defeat. We cannot do it. And people in Palestine are not accepting defeat. People are sacrificing. Prisoners are not accepting defeat. The least we could do is speak up for them and speak up and express our solidarity.
Yeah, and I also want to mention that in 2003, you organized a tribute for Edward Said. Was that at NYU or was that?
Yes, I was a postdoc at NYU.
And they tried to shut that down as well, but you figured out a way around it, correct?
Yes, the Zionists tried to say, well, he doesn't teach at NYU. And why is NYU doing it? So we talked to the English department. We talked to the literature. We talked to Edward Said's students who studied with him, who are teaching at NYU. And we had two of them actually moderate the event. I, kept my name out of it because I'm from Yale, so I'm an outsider. I think 200 people, the whole auditorium was full. And we did. There is always a way. There is always a way. They say, no, this way, you go around. And we're good at that because we have so many checkpoints. And if the checkpoint is closed, you find around ways through the hills, through the mud. You always find a way. There is always a way to get around if you want to get around. So you try it. You try everything, and you try it with your colleagues and with your allies. And if there is nobody to receive you at the other side, you can go around. But, you come with other people and you figure a way.
So what would you say is the state of public intellectualism today? Just given what's happening now, I think you're the most equipped to answer that question.
I think, let's talk maybe about the U.S. so we can become more concrete. I think that Zionism is in crisis. Not only in Israel, they are in crisis. And the only thing that's saving them is the weapons and the genocide that they are carrying. Otherwise, Israel would crumble. And if people watch the news and so on, the only thing is that they are a killing machine, killing people. That's the only thing that they're making attention to. But in the U.S. also, they are in crisis. With all the attacks, with all the Nazis, with all the laws they're trying to pass at the universities, everywhere else. But look how many scholars that are every day speaking up, no matter what it's costing you. Every day, more and more faculty members can be quote-unquote disciplined because they say Palestine. A Genius Award winner, Trickster. They even changed her, the announcement about her, and she put it on X. Now Princeton wants to discipline her. And she did not back down. Viet Thanh, the Pulitzer Prize winner, the Vietnamese, they canceled him from the Y speaking. And he continued writing. He's writing op-eds and so on. There is so much People are saying, you want to set up a museum, turns out the kafiyya, scholars refuse, boycott, I'm not going to participate. Students, UCLA, they punished them last semester. They even got Israeli militias to come and attack them. And then the police came and attacked them at UCLA. 2 days ago, they set up a new embankment. The police came and took them out. But they continue. Everywhere, the students at Columbia, they shut down Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Laws for Peace. They created a new coalition, Quad. I mean, everywhere. There is something, and I would say, and you asked me about the state of intellectuals. The reason I'm saying this is because people are thinking and refusing through their intellectual thinking that they're refusing this discipline, they're refusing the McCarthyism, and they are saying we're not going to go along with it. McCarthyism in the 50s was able to succeed a lot because they silenced people, they threatened their livelihood, and a lot of people went along with it, and they isolated the targets. Today, when people get attacked, everybody comes and supports them. Everybody comes and supports them. It doesn't allow them to be alone. When the students get attacked, everybody comes. I mean, when the Columbia students were attacked, everybody in the neighborhood offers them homes, brought them food. When city college students, no, they're not left alone. And people go to their bail hearings, raise money, protest. I mean, so nobody is left alone. Everybody receives solidarity, everybody receives support, and everybody rises and everybody signs. So all these corrupt university presidents are going to keep imposing more and more punishment in collaboration with the Zionists, and they're going to go down in the dustbin of history as supporting genocide. Good reputation for them. That's what they want. That's what they're going to do. The same way that people who supported apartheid, they're going to go down as supporting apartheid. Same for slavery, same for genocide, same for everything else. That's what they want. You can try to convince them they don't want to. Your choice, very smaller and smaller numbers. But those of us, our movement is growing and people are learning more. And instead of actually people being silenced, they want to do more teachers. They want to do more education. They want to create more class. I mean, I have never had more students in my classes. I can't keep them away. I mean, the university always says, oh, no enrollment. That's why we can have more classes. I'm like, we need more classes. The students want to learn more and more. They don't even want to leave class when it's in. And it's like 3-hour class. And I'm not the only one. There is so much thirst and hunger to learn about Palestine, to understand more and more. So it is the history is moving in a way that supports justice, that wants to end the genocide, that people don't want it done in their name. And I will say something to you that we haven't even announced. We had an amazing union convention. We just finished on Sunday. And we proposed a resolution titled Money for Jobs and Education, Not for War and Occupation. And it passed in all the caucuses. And we submitted it to the assembly. And we believe it's going to pass. They're still calculating, but we believe it's going to pass. And the whole union membership was so enthusiastic about it. And everybody wants to learn more about Palestine. Everybody wants to learn about how we talk about changing the priorities of this country and not spending money in the war industries, but actually doing the priorities right. People are understanding the connection and listening. So I think if we could stop the genocide, we are moving in the right direction. And they're not going to stop us. They're not going to be able to stop us.
I agree. They're not going to stop us.
And to see the power that's coming from the people and compare that to the ruling class and how this oppression is going from top to bottom, but then the people in the streets and the students and the communities are standing with us and wanting to learn more. And I think you're playing such a huge role in both in empowerment, but also in divulging and talking about Palestine. I think it's so powerful and so grateful for your voice, both in academia and in the public. And you are part of a really important group that I consider trailblazing in this space currently, which is the Palestine Feminist Collective, a group of young women, and actually women of all generations, but coming together and working towards normalizing Palestinian feminism, if you will, or the counter to the Western feminist perspective. So I'm grateful to be in that space with you, and I watch you empower people and talk about Palestine regularly. So yeah, thank you for everything that you've done, Dr. Rabab.
My honor and privilege.
Well, I'm just waiting for the autobiography to come out.
It's being reviewed by the editors, so we'll see.
Oh, it is really, there is one. Oh, really? Oh, wow. When do you think it'll actually officially come out?
It depends on them, and I'm not like, I'm مش مستعجل, as they say, because I have so much stuff I'm working on. But yeah.
So that's great. That means it's another conversation on Sumud Podcast when that comes out.
I mean, I think she defines Sumud, right? Herself, yeah.
Just much,
I have
yeah.
a question. It may be a bit tricky to answer, but I think, again, I don't know who better to ask than you. How has religion guided the Palestinian struggle, or how has it derailed it, if any, in any way?
I don't think it's, okay, I think it's both. I think at one point there was a point when people like became too, just like politics too, became too narrow and too, let's say, I would say sectarian in terms of religion, in terms of politics. Holding things too narrow in their interests was not helpful. And I think when people became much more pluralistic and understanding of each other and supportive of each other, things became much better. So look at one point when everybody, like even like leftist groups, say, okay, we're not going to work with the religious groups, and they follow the Marxist notion that opium is the death of the religion is the opium of the masses, and so on. And he said it one time. خلاص, let it go, yani. You don't have to keep repeating it every single day. And also, this is our community is religious, and people are entitled to their religiosity, their spirituality. You cannot, and there has been a lot of analysis also in Marxist and materialists and so on, that you cannot, if there are things that are materials, there are things that are immaterial, metaphysical, and you have to account for all of that in people's lives. And you cannot say one thing or the other. And you have to be open to all possibilities in order to have space for everybody to contribute and people to work with each other. So I think like today we're getting a little bit closer. We're not there yet, but I think we're getting a little bit closer in the ways that people look at resistance groups. That it is, and I think part of it is pragmatic because the resistance is being led by Islamist groups, the majority. But I think part of it also, it has shaken some of the old dogmas that this is not what it is. And I think also Islamist groups have also relaxed a bit about some of the things that they thought, this is our red line, we're not going to move beyond it. So I think this been give and take and so on. We're getting to a point where there is something that for us, like Palestine, justice for Palestine, freedom for our people, dignity, living in peace, they are the higher values that we can figure out how we can live with each other. And there are certain things that we can manage. It's not really a question of life and death. We can manage with each other. And I think we are at that point that we need, and this is, by the way, also the role of intellectuals come in, because I think there was a period when we had what I call secular fundamentalism that was so problematic that people were so like stubborn, and they actually thought that they owned the movement, when honestly they only own their own thinking and the table they're sitting on. To be fair and clear, now people are becoming much more relaxed, and they're realizing how heavy the responsibility they have and the burden. It is all the people. And I think we're getting to the point where we're becoming much more tolerant with each other, loving to each other, respectful of each other, realizing that we have our own cause, our people, our country, our future with each other, that it is changing a lot of things. We have to just stop the genocide. We just have to stop the genocide. So we have to stop the erasure of our people. The genocide is killing the future generation. We just have to stop that. And then we can actually talk about all of these things, which is that work with each other. But I really think that we are in a good place even in that conversation as well.
No, I agree. And I think this is the first time I've ever seen individuals say, no, resistance is good. Before, you were afraid to say resistance is good because you'd be labeled a terrorist, right? Or you'd be labeled violent. So I think I'm seeing the discourse change quite a bit there. So just one last question. First of all, I think if you teach next semester, I think I'm going to fly out to California and take one of your classes if they allow me.
I'm teaching my Palestine course, Islamophobia and Comparative Border Studies, Palestine and Mexico.
Okay. I'm going to try to figure out how to maybe take that course if possible. Your message to the diaspora, what I'm going to tell you now, what is your message to the diaspora, both men and women?
I think it depends which diaspora we're talking about. If we're talking about the North American diaspora, because there is also diaspora in the Arab world, there is in refugee camps. I think each diaspora has its own role. And I think diaspora, or we always need to acknowledge that the diaspora became a diaspora because of the displacement, because of the uprooting, because of the Nakba. People did not become diasporic out of will. They became diasporic because of certain conditions. I think that our people are doing a great job about supporting and coming together and protesting what's going on and not being afraid anymore. I think we need to do more. All the time we need to do more. We need to speak up more. We need to support more. We need to send more money for food and medical supplies. We need to send more doctors. We need to support more core classes in the university. We need to teach our kids more about Palestine and its culture, its language, its music, its history, its struggle, its resistance. We need to support each other. We need to build alliances with everybody. We need to continue struggling for justice day in and day out. And we need to reject anybody who tell us our struggle is not just. We need to reject anybody who tries to cast shadows on our struggle for justice. And we need to believe and be convinced and never lose faith that we will be victorious and we will one day return to Palestine and realize the right of return.
The great Dr. Rabab Abdulhadi, what a message. I mean, thank you so much for being on. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. You exemplify the struggle for liberation. And to echo what you just said, liberation is inevitable. And I'm honored to be in this. We are honored to be in this fight and struggle for liberation with you and with everybody else. Sending love and support and strength to all our people back home in Palestine. And I'm sure your message comes loud and clear to them as well. So hopefully we'll have you on again sometime in the near future. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Listen, stay tuned, cause it's time for Sumud.